Hey everybody, Jeff Schneider here. You know, when I started improvising, I had no idea what I was doing. And if somebody had told me these 5 lessons back when I first picked up an instrument, it would have saved me years of frustration. So the first time I became aware of what improvising was back in middle school. I was playing in the jazz band, and the band director asked if anybody wanted to take a solo during the concert. And I thought that sounded pretty cool, but I had no idea how to do it. And so he taught everybody who wanted to solo, he taught us the blues scale. And that was my introduction to improvising and soloing. The problem with that was it set me off on this path of being obsessed with learning scales and music theory and thinking that in order to sound good, I needed to play the right notes. And there is some truth to playing notes that fit with chords. That is important. But the more important lesson that I wish I had been told is that pitches do not matter as much as rhythm and phrasing. If you prioritize rhythm and phrasing, it actually doesn't matter what pitches you play. So for example, if I play like a C major chord or a C6-9, something like this, and I'll count off a tempo, and I'm gonna play all the wrong notes. I'm gonna play the black keys, which don't fit into this C major scale at all. Check it out. 1, 2, 3, 4. So none of those notes fit, technically speaking, but it still sounds cool because I prioritized my rhythm and my phrasing. Now, I think everybody knows what rhythm is, but in case you don't know what phrasing is, it's just how you play the notes that you're playing. Are you playing them loud? Are you playing them soft? Is there a swing feel? Is it straight? It's how you play the notes. It took me the longest time to really learn this lesson. In fact, I don't think I truly learned it until I started teaching improvising, and I would give all of my students these licks and I would teach them about chord tones, and they never really sounded any better until we started working on the phrasing and the rhythm. And then it didn't actually matter what notes they were playing because everything would sound good once you get those two things together. All right, on to lesson number 2. You've got your phrasing and your rhythm dialed in. Now it's time to start thinking about music theory. But the big mistake that I made over and over again was letting music theory drive the soloing ship, if you will. What I mean is, I would let the music theory take control of what my ear really should have been in control of. So, let's be clear about this. Your ear is in charge, meaning you play what you hear, and the music theory supports that so that it can help you convert the sound into notes. I'll do an example in just a second. But what so many people do is that they let the music theory come into the driver's seat, they push everything else into the back seat. So yeah, maybe you're hearing some stuff, but really what you're doing is prioritizing thinking, all of this left brain, music theory, cerebral approach to improvising. It's not gonna end well. So make sure that your ear is in the driver's seat and your music theory is supporting your ear, not the other way around. So here's an example that I think will clear some of this up. Let's take a melody that everybody knows, Mary Had a Little Lamb. So I'm gonna start by just singing the melody. Da 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 da. Okay, now we've got this sound. My ear is in the driver's seat. That's a good thing. But now I'm gonna start to get some music theory in the mix here so I can figure out what notes I'm playing so I can actually play it on my instrument. All right, let's go from just those nonsense syllables to actual scale degree numbers. I'm gonna go like this now. 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 3, 3. Okay, I'm getting closer to the actual note names. We've got the sound, then we converted it to scale degree numbers. Now I'm going to figure out what that first note is. It's a G. And that means that 3 is G. So if 3 is G, what key are we in? E flat major. And if I know it's 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, and I know my E flat major scale, I know it's gonna be G, F, E flat, F, G. So that's how you take sound and you convert it into notes so that you can play what you're hearing on your instrument. By the way, guys, if you want to download that chord scale chart in the key of E flat major, plus all of the other major and minor keys, you can grab them for free using the link in the description. These are the last chord scale charts you'll ever need, as they clearly show how scales, chords, modes, and chord tones relate to one another, making it much, much easier to play what you hear in your head while grounding it in music theory. So there's that famous Charlie Parker quote where he says, you've got to learn your instrument, then you practice, 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 and then you finally get up there on the bandstand, forget all that, and just wail. In order to wail, in order to just play and forget it all, you have to know the music theory so well that you don't even have to think about it. Just like the way you know your language that you speak so well. You're not thinking about grammar or syntax when you talk. The words just flow because you know it in your bones, and that's how you improvise. But in order to get there, you have to know the music theory really, really, really well. All right, on to lesson number 3. This one is super important, and if you don't know this lesson, you're gonna end up making the same mistake that so many other soloists make, and that is thinking that they're not responsible for the time, like the drummer or the bass player is. So just because you have a drummer playing with you or a bass player, or you're playing along with a backing track and they're taking care of the time, the groove, the beat, that doesn't mean you're off the hook. In fact, you need to be just as dialed in to the time as the drummer or the bass player. There are so many improvisers that kind of float on top of the time that the rhythm section provides, and sometimes they can kind of sneak by and get away with it, but it becomes clearly apparent as soon as the rhythm section does something kind of interesting with the groove or the beat or the time. They start messing with it, maybe some polyrhythms or something like that. And suddenly it's like the rug gets pulled out from under the soloist. I've been there many, many times. It's an awful feeling, and it's confirmation that you were not as clear on where the beat was as you should have been. So you can never take the time for granted. You do not want to be relying on the time to be provided by the rhythm section. You have to be as responsible for it in your own playing. So how do you work on this? Well, one of the best things you can do is practice playing rhythms that are syncopated, meaning they're not laying out the beat or the time in a clear way. So for instance, if I play a line like this, a 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a pretty clear-cut line as far as where the beat is, but the next level is to dance around the beat and do something like this, a 1, 2, 3, 4. So there I'm playing on offbeats, ba-do, ba, 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 ba. And now I'm forced to feel the time. I'm not playing it anymore, I'm feeling it. Once you're able to play lines like that where you're sort of emphasizing offbeats, another great exercise to do is start messing around with groups of notes that imply other time signatures. So for instance, something like this, a 1, a 2, 3, 4. Now that sounds like I'm playing in 3, like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. But I'm actually implying that 3 over the 4. And in order to do that, you have to be very clear about where that original time and beat is in order to create this illusion of this other time signature. So a couple different levels of exercises that you can use to strengthen your inner feel and your inner time. Really, really important. Do not rely on the drummer or the bass player. All right, on to lesson number 4. This one hits home for me because I used to be obsessed with learning vocabulary, and I still love a good lick. Don't get me wrong, I still like to learn new licks and take them through the keys and all the rest. But for a while, it became my sole focus, and I completely forgot about developing ideas, playing melodically, and really that's what it's all about. Because at the end of the day, improvisation is spontaneous composition. And if you're not aware of what makes a good composition and how to compose a melody, then you have no business improvising using licks or shredding on your instrument. You've sort of bypassed the most crucial step, which is understanding how to create a melody and do so on the spot. Any of your favorite soloists could, I'm sure, shred up and down their instruments, play all these fancy lines, but I'm sure that if they wanted to, they could simplify and come up with a simple melody, like a nursery rhyme level melody over any chord progression. And that is the exercise I want you to practice. See if you can come up with a nursery rhyme level melody over any chord progression that you're working on. And if you can't do that, again, that means you have no business trying to play fancy lines over that progression. Come up with that nursery rhyme-like melody first and make sure it is simple enough that an 8-year-old could sing it back to you. And I'll do a quick example here with Autumn Leaves. A 1, 2, 3, 4. so simple, but that's the point. Once you can do that, then you can start dressing it up, and eventually you'll get back to those fancy lines, but you'll be building that on top of a foundation of concrete melodic material, and that's a really important step you do not want to skip. Now, before we get to lesson number 5, which I think is the most important lesson of them all, I want to let you know that I have a course called The Soloing System, which will walk you through my approach to learning how to improvise so that you can get your solos sounding good and play something that you're proud of, because there's nothing like it, like listening back to a solo that you played and being like, that actually sounds pretty good. It's an amazing feeling, and I want that for you too, without having to lock yourself in a woodshed and practice for 3 years. Because while that can work, it's a lot more fun to start sounding good quickly, and that's what I want for you. So check out the soloing system. It's linked in the description below and somewhere on the screen. But on to lesson number 5, and I really needed to hear this lesson when I first started improvising, and even now I could use a reminder, and that is when you go to take a solo, stop trying to impress the audience. Because if you're trying to impress, you're probably playing stuff that is harder than you can handle, and you're gonna end up sounding bad. You're gonna end up sounding like you're holding on for dear life. And the thing is, when we play stuff that feels easy to us, we sound better. It's not rocket science, but so often we avoid playing the thing that feels comfortable because we think, oh, that's gonna sound lame. And instead we reach for this thing that is supposedly really, really hard, but we end up sounding uncomfortable because we're not really capable of playing it yet. But we think, oh, because this feels hard to me, it's gonna be more impressive to the listener. No, that's garbage. If you play stuff that feels good, you're gonna sound good. Plain and simple. Stop trying to impress whoever is listening. Now, that doesn't mean you can never take a risk when you're soloing and reach for something that you're not quite sure you're gonna be able to land. You can still do that, but first you have to find your footing. And you can do that by playing the stuff that feels easy to you, that feels good, you're gonna sound good. And then once you found your footing and you're feeling the beat and you're in the zone, then you can reach for something that's a little more advanced. Just make sure that when you do take that risk, you're doing it to serve the music, not to impress the audience, because then you're letting your ego play your solo, and it's not gonna end well. So I hope those lessons help you out with your solos, and make sure to check out the soloing system if you wanna learn more about my approach to learning to solo and improvise and start sounding good as quickly as possible. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.